The rain came down like punishment. Not the soft one that makes Seoul romantic, blurs the city lights into something beautiful or hits the ground like it means it. But one that soaks through everything in seconds and doesn't apologize. She was standing outside the gates of a Gangnam penthouse that had her fingerprints on every surface and her name on none of the documents. 8 months pregnant. No umbrella. No coat. No shoes. Just a Jamaican woman on a Korean street in the heaviest rain of the year, one hand pressed to the side of her stomach where the baby was kicking like it knew, like it understood before she did that the world outside those gates was going to require everything they both had. She didn't cry. That was the thing. Standing in that rain, soaked to the skin, carrying a child she had made with a man who had just looked her in the eyes and chosen this, she did not cry. She looked back at the penthouse lights through the iron gates. Then she looked forward into the dark wet Seoul street. And something in her face settled into a stillness that had nothing to do with defeat. A black car slowed beside her. The window came down. A man looked at her from the driver's seat, Korean, maybe mid-30s, dark eyes, jaw like carved stone, with a stillness of someone for whom rain and crisis and impossible situations are simply weather. His arms visible on the steering wheel, tattoos from wrist to shoulder, dark ink telling stories she couldn't read yet. He didn't say anything immediately. He looked at her stomach, her face, and the penthouse gates behind her. Then he reached across and opened the passenger door. And held out an umbrella. Welcome back. Are you new here? Do you want to know why a man in his right senses would throw his heavily pregnant wife out into the rain? Do you want to know why she was standing in that rain and didn't shed a single tear? Subscribe to Novatales TV right now. Like this video. And drop your answers in the comment section. Because this story is only just beginning. And trust me, you are not ready. Kezia Campbell was 28 years old when she walked into the Lotte Hotel Seoul Grand Ballroom on a Thursday evening in November and changed the entire direction of her life without knowing. She had been in Korea for 3 years by then. Arrived at 25 on a prestigious international law fellowship, one of only 4 recipients globally that year, the only Jamaican, certainly the only black woman. She had graduated top of her class from the University of the West Indies, completed her bar in London, and chosen Seoul specifically because nobody expected her to. That was always how Kezia operated. She went where the room wasn't ready for her and made it ready. She was tall, dark-skinned with the particular deep brown richness of Jamaican coastal lineage, wide intelligent eyes, natural hair that she wore in elaborate protective styles that somehow always looked both professional and regal, a laugh that arrived before she planned it and left rooms slightly warmer than she found them. She spoke Korean with a Jamaican accent that made native speakers do a double take before breaking into delighted smiles. She was extraordinary and she knew it and she wore it without apology. The gala was a legal industry event. Black tie, Gangnam money, Seoul's elite legal and business community gathered in the way they gathered, to see and be seen and make the connections that moved the world. Kezia was there representing her fellowship organization. Shin Jae-won was there because he owned half the room. She noticed him before he noticed her. Impossible not to, a Korean, 34, tall for a Korean man, broad-shouldered, the kind of face that looked like it had been constructed specifically to make people trust it. Classically handsome in a way that felt almost architectural. A deep navy suit that cost more than her monthly fellowship stipend. He moved through the room with the ease of a man who had never in his life needed to introduce himself to anyone. When he noticed her noticing him, he smiled. Not a polished smile. Not the diplomatic smile he'd been deploying all evening. Something more honest than that, something almost surprised. He crossed the room. "You're staring," he said in English, perfectly accented. "I'm observing," Kezia replied. "It's different." He laughed. Actually laughed. And something in his face shifted into something real. "Shin Jae-won," he said. "Kezia Campbell," she replied. "And before you ask, Jamaica." "Yes, my Korean is real. No, I didn't learn it from K-pop." He laughed again. By the end of the evening he had asked for her number. By the end of the month he had asked for everything else. Kezia was not naive. She was a criminal defense lawyer. She understood that wealthy Korean men with no obvious 9-to-5 and an endless supply of expensive dinners existed in a particular ecosystem. She asked questions. She did research. She found what anyone searching Shin Jae-won's name would find: legitimate business holdings, entertainment industry investments, a talent agency called Seoul Entertainment that managed some of Korea's mid-tier music acts, property developments, board memberships. Clean. Documented. Publicly verifiable. She found nothing because there was nothing to find. That was the point of him. Shin Jae-won was the cleanest dirty thing in Seoul. They dated for a year. He was attentive in the way that powerful men rarely bother to be present, curious about her work, genuinely interested in her cases, sitting across dinner tables listening to her break down legal arguments with an expression of focused admiration that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't expected to need. He met her mother on a video call. Charmed her completely in 3 minutes. He flew Kezia to Jeju, to Tokyo, to Bangkok, always in private transport, always in the kind of hotels that don't advertise their prices. He never pressured her. Never rushed her. Let her set every pace. When he proposed, quietly and privately, just the two of them on the rooftop of his Hanam-dong penthouse with Seoul spread below them like an offering, she said yes. Not because of the ring. Because of the way he looked at her when she wasn't performing for anyone. Like she was the most interesting thing in any room she entered. She should have asked why a man like Shin Jae-won needed her specifically to feel that way. She didn't ask. She said yes. The marriage was good for 2 years. Not perfect. Kezia noticed things the way lawyers always notice things: small inconsistencies, conversations that stopped when she entered rooms, staff at Seoul Entertainment whose job titles were never quite clear, the particular way certain men looked at Jae-won when they thought nobody was watching. Not with the deference of employees. With the careful respect of men who understood consequences. But Jae-won was always warm with her. Always present. The penthouse was hers, her books on every shelf, her art on the walls, her Jamaican cookbooks in the kitchen alongside his mother's Korean recipes. He gave her cases. Good ones. Seoul Entertainment's legal work. Talent contracts, copyright disputes, the occasional criminal defense for artists who got into trouble. The cases were interesting and lucrative and kept her sharp. She won every one. She was proud of that. She should have looked more carefully at what she was winning. In her 3rd year of marriage, Kezia became pregnant. Jae-won was overjoyed. Visibly, physically overjoyed in a way that moved her, hand always on her stomach, names researched and argued over happily for weeks, the entire nursery redone 3 times until it was perfect. For 6 months of the pregnancy everything was the best it had ever been. Then something shifted. He became distracted. Then secretive. Then a version of careful around her that felt less like consideration and more like management. She noticed. She said nothing. Watched and waited. Because that was who she was. The night Kezia found the 3rd phone, she was 8 months pregnant and couldn't sleep. This was not unusual. At 8 months, sleep was more a theory than a practice. She moved through the penthouse at 3 a.m. the way she had been moving through it for weeks, slowly, carefully, one hand always on her stomach, the baby an entire presence inside her. Jae-won was asleep. She had checked. His breathing the deep even rhythm of someone with a clean conscience, or someone who had learned to perform one. She went to his study to find a book. The 3rd phone was between the cushions of his study couch. Not hidden. Not secured. Just fallen there, the way things fall when a man is moving too fast between too many lives to track every object. It buzzed in her hand. A notification preview. No lock screen privacy filter because this phone was never supposed to be found. A name, a photograph of a man she recognized immediately, and a date 3 days away. And a number she understood within 2 seconds of looking at it. Not a phone number. A price. She stood in the dark study, 8 months pregnant, bare feet on cold marble, and looked at the photograph of the man in the notification. Park Sung-yoon. She had spent for months defending Park Sung-yoon against charges of corporate espionage 18 months ago. She had won his acquittal. She had been proud of that win. It had been one of her most technically complex cases, the evidence against him circumstantial but compelling, and she had dismantled it argument by argument until the prosecution had nothing left to stand on. She had believed he was innocent. The notification on the third phone told her that Park Sung-yoon had been paid an amount she could see clearly on the screen. Paid for what, the notification didn't specify. But below his photograph was a second image. A man she didn't recognize. A location in Tokyo. And a small symbol she had seen before, on documents that had come through Solus Entertainment, in the corners of paperwork she had filed, in places she had noticed and not registered because alone each instance meant nothing. Together they meant everything. Kezia stood in the dark. Then she opened the phone properly. It required a 6-digit passcode. She tried Jaewon's birthday. It opened. She read for 2 hours. By the time she put the phone back exactly where she had found it, she knew everything. Solus Entertainment was not a talent agency. It was a transit network. Artists, managers, tour coordinators, technical staff, real people, some of them genuinely talented, moving legitimately across Asia. And among them, moving in the infrastructure she had never questioned, a network of contractors whose talent was not music. Assassination. Corporate. Political. Occasionally personal. Deployed across 7 countries. Contracted by entities she recognized from international news, corporations, political organizations, foreign intelligence agents operating in grey space. And the legal architecture protecting all of it. Her work. Every case she had won. Every acquittal. Every contract she had structured. Every dispute she had resolved. All of it had been carefully selected and fed to her by a husband who had recognized in her, at that gala 3 years ago, not just a woman he wanted. A weapon he could use. She put the phone back. Walked to the bathroom. Sat on the edge of the tub. Pressed both hands to her stomach where the baby was kicking. And made the decision that would save both their lives. If you are watching from anywhere in the world right now, drop your country in the comments below. Because what Kezia found on that phone is only the beginning of what this story is going to cost everyone in it. Subscribe to Novatales TV right now. Don't miss a single moment of what comes next. She was careful for 5 days. 5 days of breakfast made and eaten together. 5 days of pregnancy check-ins and baby name conversations and evening walks along the Han River that Jaewon suggested and she agreed to with a smile that gave nothing away. 5 days of Kezia Campbell, criminal defense lawyer, building her case. She photographed everything on the third phone across 3 separate nights, memorizing its location exactly each time so it returned to precisely where it had been. She cross-referenced names from its content against her own case files, pulling threads she had filed away without connecting, seeing now with horrible clarity the pattern that had been invisible when she was inside it. She compiled everything into encrypted files on a cloud server she created under a name that had never existed. She contacted nobody. Not yet. She was still deciding who could be trusted. In a network this size, reaching this high, the answer to that question required the same precision as everything else. On the 5th day Jaewon found out she knew. She never discovered exactly how. Perhaps the third phone had a secondary monitoring function she hadn't detected. Perhaps someone in the penthouse had seen her moving at 3 a.m. Perhaps the thing that makes guilty men dangerous, the constant surveillance of their own world for threats, had simply landed on her. She came home from her obstetrician appointment on a Tuesday afternoon to find him in the living room. Waiting. The way Shin Jaewon waited was different from how other men waited. There was no agitation in him, no pacing, no visible anger. He was simply still in the way that very dangerous things are still, the stillness that comes before and not after. Sit down, Kezia, he ordered. She Saturday. He placed a phone on the table between them. Not the third phone. A tablet, showing her, on the cloud server she had been certain was invisible, the encrypted files she had spent 5 days building. "How long have you known?" he asked. She looked at her husband across the table. At the face she had chosen. At the man who had listened to her talk about her cases with such focused admiration for 3 years. He hadn't been admiring her. He had been monitoring his own operation through her mouth. "Long enough," she said. Something left his face. The last remaining performance of the man she had married simply departed. What was underneath was not monstrous. That would have been easier, was simply cold, managerial. The face of a man solving a problem. He made a phone call. Spoke in rapid Korean she understood completely, had always understood completely, and had never been meant to understand this specific conversation. Prepare the documents and find somewhere appropriate. He ended the call. He looked at her stomach for a moment, one long look, something moving briefly behind his cold eyes, and then looked away from it like a decision being made. "You should have stayed in your lane, Kezia." "You put me in your lane," she replied. "You built the lane around me." He said nothing to that. What happened next happened quickly. The rain had already started by the time she was at the gates. She had been allowed to take nothing. No phone, no bag, no coat, and no even shoes. She had been in the house slippers she wore in the evenings, and they had been lost somewhere on the way to the door. Just Kezia. 8 months of their child pressing against her ribs. The heaviest rain Seoul had produced in 3 years hitting the ground like something personal. The penthouse gates closed behind her with a sound like a full stop. She stood on the pavement. The rain soaked through her immediately. Her natural hair, pinned up in a protective style she had done herself 2 days ago, was flattened against her face within seconds. Her maternity dress, grey jersey, the most comfortable thing she owned, was plastered to her body. The baby kicked. Hard. 4 times in rapid succession. She pressed her hand to the side of her stomach. "I know," she said in patois, the way she always spoke to the baby when they were alone. "Me no. But W.I. all right. You hear me? W.I. all right." She looked back at the penthouse lights behind the iron gates. Then she looked forward into the dark wet Seoul street. She did not cry. A criminal defense lawyer does not cry when she has already identified her next move. Tears are for people who have run out of options. Kezia Campbell had not run out of options. She had, in fact, spent 5 days making sure of that. The black car slowed beside her. She heard it before she saw it, the particular sound of expensive tires on wet Seoul pavement, slow and deliberate, not passing. The window came down. The man behind the wheel looked at her the way very few people had ever looked at her, without surprise. Without the particular adjustment she had spent her life watching people make when they encountered a tall dark-skinned Jamaican woman in an unexpected context. He looked at her like he had been expecting her. Korean, mid-30s. A face that had been built by harder experiences than good living, angular, jaw like a decision, dark eyes that assessed without performing the assessment. His arms on the steering wheel, tattoos from wrist to shoulder disappearing under a dark shirt, dense and deliberate, ink that told entire histories. He looked at her stomach, her face, and at the penthouse gates behind her. Then back at her face. He reached across the passenger seat. Held out an umbrella. "Get in," he said. In Korean first. Then in English, accented but clear. "Please." Kezia looked at him for a moment. She was a criminal defense lawyer. She understood risk assessment. She understood that getting into a car with a stranger in the middle of the night was a certain category of decision. She also understood that standing in this rain, 8 months pregnant, outside the gates of a penthouse belonging to a man who had just decided she was a problem to be solved, was a different category of decision entirely. She looked at the tattoos on his arms. She opened the car door and got in. "Do you want to know who this man is? Do you want to know what world Kezia just stepped into? And do you want to know what a Jamaican lawyer 8 months pregnant is about to do to one of the most powerful criminal organizations in Seoul?" Subscribe to Novatales TV right now. Like this video. Drop a comment and tell us, did Kezia make the right decision getting into that car? Because this story is about to go somewhere you are absolutely not ready for. His name was Oh Tae-young. She learned this not from him but from the young woman who brought her dry clothes and hot miok soup 40 minutes after they arrived at his compound, a residential complex on the northern edge of Seoul that looked from the outside like a private medical facility and felt from the inside like somewhere the rules of ordinary Seoul did not apply. Mr. O says to rest, the young woman said in careful English, eyes respectfully lowered. He says the doctor is coming. I don't need a doctor, Kezia said. He says you will say that, the young woman replied. He says to tell you the doctor is for the baby, not for you. What is his name? Kezia asked in Korean. The young woman looked up, the surprise of being addressed in fluent Korean flickering across her face before her composure returned. Oh Tae-young, you will have heard of him. Kezia had heard of him. Every criminal defense lawyer in Seoul had heard of Oh Tae-young. He was the name that came up in cases that didn't go to trial. The name mentioned in hushed consultation rooms by prosecutors who had built airtight cases that somehow came apart before charging. The name associated with 3 separate national investigations that had each concluded with insufficient evidence and the particular institutional embarrassment of men who know they have been outmaneuvered but cannot prove how. He was, by every informed account in Seoul's legal and underworld communities, the most dangerous man in the city. Not because he was violent, though she would learn he was capable of that with the same controlled precision he brought to everything else. Because he was intelligent that built systems invisible enough to be undeniable and impenetrable enough to be untouchable. She had never had a case connected to him directly. She understood now that this was not coincidence. Shin Jae-won had kept her away from anything that could lead her to Oh Tae-young. Because Oh Tae-young was the one person in Seoul whose legal exposure Jae-won could not afford to have Kezia anywhere near. They were rivals. They had been rivals for 11 years. The doctor came, checked everything, declared the baby well and Kezia's blood pressure concerning but manageable, left instructions and medication and a look on his face that suggested he was accustomed to treating unexpected guests in this compound and had learned not to ask questions. Oh Tae-young came to see her an hour later. He pulled a chair to the side of the bed she had been installed in. She had not consented to the bed exactly, but her feet had given out from standing and her body had made certain decisions her pride hadn't approved, and sat with the ease of a man comfortable in all environments. In the lamplight of the room she could see the tattoos properly. Not decorative. Not the fashion ink of wealthy Korean men performing edge. These were deliberate and dense and covered both arms from wrist to where his shirt began at the collar. Traditional Korean motifs interwoven with something older, imagery she didn't immediately recognize but understood instinctively was not arbitrary. His face in stillness was harder than it had seemed in the car. The jawline more defined, the dark eyes carrying more weight. But there was something in how he looked at her, specifically at her, at the fullness of her, not adjusting or managing his reaction to a black Jamaican woman 8 months pregnant in his compound, that was simply direct, present and unperforming. Kezia Campbell, criminal defense lawyer. Jamaican national. Korean resident visa. Married 3 years ago to Shin Jae-won. His dark eyes moved briefly to her stomach. Currently 8 months pregnant with his child. You know who I am, Kezia said. I know who everyone connected to Shin Jae-won is, Oh Tae-young replied. Then you know what I found. Something shifted in his expression. Barely visible. The equivalent of a significant reaction in a man who had eliminated most of his reactions. What makes you think you found something? He asked. Because a man doesn't throw his 8-month pregnant wife into the rain over nothing, and because I am a criminal defense lawyer who spent 5 days building a case before he found out I was building it. I know what I found. The question is whether you know what I found and whether that is why I am sitting in your compound right now. You're not what I expected, he said. People keep underestimating Jamaican women, Kezia replied. It never ends well for them. The files you encrypted, they're safe. Safer than anything in this building, Kezia answered. And before you ask, no, I will not give you access until I understand exactly what you intend to do with what I know. I didn't survive tonight to hand my leverage to the first dangerous man who offered me an umbrella. Oh Tai-young nodded, with what looked like respect. Tell me what you found, and I will tell you what it means. All of it. Not the version J1 fed you. The real version. Kezia pressed her hand to her stomach. The baby was still. Listening, she thought. Or resting before the storm. Start with Solus, she said. And Oh Tai-young began to tell her the truth about the world she had been living inside. If you are watching from anywhere in the world right now, drop a comment and tell us where you are. Because what Oh Tai-young is about to tell Kezia will change everything she thought she knew about her marriage, about her career, about the cases she won. Subscribe to Novatales TV right now. This story is only just getting started, and trust me, you are nowhere near ready for where it goes. Oh Tai-young talked for 2 hours. Kezia listened the way she listened in courtrooms, completely still, processing everything, interrupting only when precision required it, building the complete picture in her mind with the structural discipline of someone who had spent a decade arguing truth against lies in rooms designed to obscure both. Solus Entertainment was 11 years old. Built by Shin Jae-won at 23 with seed money whose origins Oh Tai-young knew and Jae-won had always been careful to bury. Legitimate on every visible surface, real artists, real contracts, real music, real tours. The talent agency functioned genuinely and profitably. It was also the most sophisticated contractor transit network operating in East and Southeast Asia. The contractors, 12 of them active at any given time, rotating, never the same faces in the same places consecutively, moved as Solus staff. Tour managers. Sound technicians. Choreography consultants. Logistics coordinators. All with genuine employment histories, genuine industry knowledge, genuine Solus contracts that Kezia had in several cases personally reviewed and approved. The targets were selected by clients Kezia had never seen. Corporations removing obstacles. Political organizations eliminating complications. 2 foreign intelligence adjacents whose names Oh Tai-young said quietly and whose significance landed in the room like dropped weight. 11 years. 43 confirmed operations. 17 countries. And the legal work. Her voice was level. She had decided early in this conversation that she would not give herself the luxury of feeling what she was feeling until she had all the information. My cases. Every case J1 brought to you was selected. The clients he gave you were either contractors who needed legal protection, intermediaries who had been exposed, or in 4 cases, people who had become liabilities and whose acquittals served a secondary purpose I won't detail yet. He fed me cases I couldn't lose, he selected them so that the evidence was manageable for someone of my ability. He needed clean wins. Documented wins. A lawyer with an impeccable record whose professional credibility was unimpeachable. Because a network of this scale needs legal infrastructure, Oh Tai-young confirmed. Not corrupt lawyers. Corrupt lawyers are liabilities. He needed a genuinely brilliant lawyer who had no idea what she was protecting. Your record is clean because you are genuinely that good. He just made sure the cases that came to you were ones where your talent served his needs. Kezia sat with that for a moment. 3 years of work. Every win she had been proud of. Every client she had believed in. The Park Sung-yoon acquittal. Park Sung-yoon is a contractor. One of the longest serving. Your acquittal kept him operational. The baby kicked. Once. Hard. How long have you known all of this? She asked. 7 years, I have known the shape of it for 7 years. What I have never had is the internal documentation. The financial architecture. The client records. The operational files and the things that would be on a phone that a man kept separate from everything else. A phone that would contain everything because it was never supposed to be found. Kezia looked at him. You need what's in my files, she said. I need what's in your files, he confirmed. And what do I get? Protection. For you and your child. legal dismantling of Solus that goes through channels J1 cannot reach. And the guarantee that every case he fed you gets reviewed and every wrongful outcome corrected. That last part, that matters most to me. I know, and the way he said it told her that he had understood this about her before she said it, which told her that he had been paying attention to who she was for longer than tonight. Why? Why does this matter to you? What is Shin J1 to you specifically? My younger brother, 5 years ago. He was a sound engineer. He took a contract with Solus for an international tour. He was 26. He stopped. Continued. He saw something he shouldn't have seen on that tour. In Bangkok. He called me from his hotel room and told me what he had seen. He never came home again. Solus reported it as an accident. Faulty hotel electrical. The Bangkok authorities closed the case in 4 days. Oh Taeyang's name was Oh Jung-soo. He wanted to produce music. The room was very quiet. I'm sorry, Kezia said. His name was Jung-soo, just that. The way people say the names of the dead to keep them present. Kezia looked at the man across from her. At the tattoos covering his arms. At the weight behind his dark eyes. At the 11 years of building something powerful enough to reach the man who had taken his brother. She thought about her own child. 8 months of heartbeat and kicks and a name she had been arguing with J1 about for weeks, a name she would now choose alone. She thought about the cases she had won. About Park Sung-yoon walking out of that courtroom. About the person in Bangkok whose death he had been paid for. Give me a laptop, I'll give you the files tonight. What followed were 3 weeks that Kezia would later describe, in testimony, as the most clarifying weeks of her life. She moved into Oh Taeyang's compound with the particular pragmatism of a woman who had assessed her options and chosen the one most likely to keep her child alive. She was given a room, a doctor who came every 2 days, access to a full legal library, and the compound's most secure network. Oh Taeyang gave her everything his 7 years of intelligence gathering had produced. She gave him everything 5 days of precise documentation had captured on the third phone. Together they built something neither could have constructed alone. Kezia's legal mind approached the evidence with the same structured methodology she brought to every case, except this time she was not defending. She was prosecuting. And the defendant was the architecture of her own marriage. Every case she had handled for Solus clients she reviewed completely. Building the chain from client to case to outcome to operation. Documenting precisely how each legal result had served the network. Creating the kind of evidence trail that could not be attributed to coincidence because coincidence does not repeat itself 43 times across 7 countries. Oh Taeyang's intelligence provided the operational context her legal documentation needed. The 2 bodies of evidence interlocked with the devastating precision of things that were always meant to be seen together. In the evenings, after the work, they sat in the compound's traditional garden, her in a chair because the ground was impossible at 8 months, him cross-legged on the stone beside her, and talked. Not always about the case. About Jung-soo who had wanted to produce music. About Kezia's mother in Kingston who had been told her daughter was visiting a client and would call soon. About Jamaica and what it felt like to be far from a place that lived permanently in your body. About what it meant to build a life inside a lie and have to reconstruct your understanding of everything you thought was real. Oh Taeyang listened the way he did everything, completely. Without offering solutions when she was not asking for them. Without performing comfort. Simply present in a way that was more sustaining than any performance of it would have been. Kezia noticed the tattoos in detail over those weeks. Asked about them one evening. He told her. Each one. His family history encoded in ink the way Koreans of his lineage had always encoded the things that mattered. His mother's name. His grandmother's village. And on his right forearm, newer than the rest, a single line of text she had to lean close to read. Oh Jung-soo. 1993 to 2019. She said nothing. Just sat with it. He looked at her looking at it. After this is over, I want to add something beside it. Something that means it was not for nothing. Then let's make sure it isn't, Kezia said. 3 weeks in, the baby arrived. Not on schedule. Not in a hospital. In the compound's medical room at 3 a.m. with Oh Taeyang's personal physician and 2 nurses and Oh Taeyang himself outside the door for 11 hours without moving from the chair in the corridor. A girl. Kezia held her in the compound's medical room in the pre-dawn quiet and looked at her face, dark-skinned, round-cheeked, eyes sealed in newborn sleep, entirely new and entirely unaware of the world she had arrived into, and felt something clarify inside her chest that had been turbulent for weeks. She named her Juno, after the Roman goddess. Protector. Queen of all she surveyed. When Oh Taeyang was allowed in, he stood in the doorway first, taking in the sight of them with an expression that had nothing controlled about it for once, something completely open moving across his face. She held Juno up slightly. "Come and meet her," Kezia said. He sat beside the bed, looked at Juno with the specific tenderness of a man who has lost someone small and precious and is being trusted with something small and precious again. "She looks like you," he said. "She better," Kezia replied. He almost smiled. Actually smiled. 10 days, then we finish it. She needs 10 days and so do I. Take 20, Oh Taeyang said. 10, Kezia repeated firmly. He looked at her. 10, he agreed. Drop a comment right now and tell us, are you Team Kezia? Because this woman just gave birth and she is already counting down to the finish. Subscribe to Novatales TV. Like this video. We are almost at the moment everything falls apart for Shin Jae-won and trust me, it is going to be devastating. Keep watching. The plan was precise in the way that only things built by people with everything to lose can be precise. Oh Taeyang had spent 7 years cultivating relationships with the right people in the right jurisdictions. An Interpol investigator who had been building a case against contractor networks in Asia for 4 years and needed exactly the kind of internal documentation Kezia had extracted. A senior prosecutor in the Korean Independent Prosecution Service who was not connected to any of the institutions Solus had been quietly managing. 2 investigative journalists, 1 Korean, 1 international, whose reputations were built on exactly this category of story. Kezia prepared the legal submission personally. 47 pages. Every case cross-referenced. Every client traced. Every operational connection documented with the precision of someone who had built her career on the difference between evidence and allegation. She also prepared something else. A personal testimony. On camera. Juno asleep in the next room. Kezia in a simple dark dress, natural hair out fully, no makeup, sitting in front of a plain wall in Oh Taeyang's compound looking directly into the camera. She spoke for 90 minutes. Her voice was level throughout. She described meeting Shin Jae-won. The marriage. The cases. The moment she understood what she had been defending. The rain. The baby kicking in the cold. She described, precisely and without dramatization, what it felt like to understand that your professional brilliance had been the instrument of other people's deaths. When she finished, the room was completely silent. Oh Taeyang, who had been watching from behind the camera, said nothing for a moment. That is the most powerful thing I have ever witnessed in a room, he said finally. Good, Kezia replied. Make sure everyone sees it. The release happened on a Wednesday morning. Simultaneous. Interpol, the Independent Prosecutor's Office, both journalists, and every major international news organization that covered organized crime in Asia. Kezia's testimony went out everywhere at the same moment. By 7 a.m. Solus Entertainment's offices were sealed. By 8 a.m. Shin Jae-won's photograph was on every screen in Korea. By 9 a.m. the first contractor arrest happened in Tokyo. Then Bangkok. Then Singapore. Then 3 more in Seoul itself. By noon Solus Entertainment had ceased to exist as a legal entity. Kezia watched it from the compound's living room with Juno against her chest, the baby entirely unbothered by the collapse of her father's empire playing out on every screen. Oh Taeyang stood beside her. Not speaking but present. His phone rang constantly. He answered none of it. At 2 p.m. a news alert came through that made Kezia close her eyes. Shin Jae-won arrested at Incheon International Airport attempting to board a private flight. Taken into custody by independent prosecutors. The footage showed him in a dark coat surrounded by plainclothes officers, his face wearing the expression of a man who had spent his entire adult life believing consequences were for other people. She felt the thing she expected to feel. The clean cold satisfaction of a system working the way it was supposed to work for once. And underneath it something more complicated. Grief for the man she had believed he was. For the marriage she had built on a foundation that had never existed. For the 3 years she had given to something that had never been real. She did not cry. She pressed her lips to the top of Juno's head. "It's done," she said to her daughter. In patois. "I done it, baby girl." Oh Tae-young heard. He looked at them both with that expression of his, the one that had nothing controlled about it. He reached out and put his hand briefly over Kezia's where it rested on Juno's back. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. Shin Jae-won was sentenced 14 months later to 31 years in Seongbuk prison. The longest sentence handed down in Korea for organized criminal conspiracy in a decade. The judge cited not only the operational crimes but the deliberate and systematic manipulation of the legal system through his wife's unknowing participation, a detail that had become one of the most discussed elements of the case both in Korea and internationally. 8 soulless contractors received sentences across 4 jurisdictions. 3 of the international client entities were exposed and dismantled. 2 are still under investigation. Every case Kezia had handled for soulless clients was reviewed. 4 acquittals were overturned. The other cases were more complicated. She had, in several instances, genuinely defended genuinely innocent people, which was the cruelest part of how she had been used. The review process took 18 months and she participated in every stage of it personally, as a witness and as a legal consultant to the review panel. She did not practice law during those 18 months. She went home to Kingston instead. Her mother met Juno for the first time on a Tuesday morning in March, took one look at her granddaughter and burst into tears of pure joy that lasted, by Kezia's count, approximately 4 minutes before converting into the practical focused grandmothering that Grace Campbell had always performed at championship level. Kezia sat on her mother's veranda in the Kingston warmth and felt, for the first time in longer than she could precisely identify, the specific physical sensation of being somewhere that had always known her. Oh Tae-young visited once during those 18 months. He came to Kingston on a Thursday, tattoos covered by a long-sleeved shirt that he was clearly slightly too warm in but wore without complaint, sitting on Grace Campbell's veranda drinking sorrel and being assessed by Kezia's mother with the particular forensic intensity of a Jamaican woman who has watched her daughter survive something enormous and is deciding whether the man across from her had anything to do with the survival or the something enormous. He passed the assessment. Kezia watched her mother decide this in real time and said nothing. When he left, her mother sat beside her. "That man is very dangerous." "I know," Kezia said. "He looks at you like you are the reason he remembers why things matter." Kezia said nothing. "Your father looked at me like that, I'm just telling you." Kezia looked out at the Kingston sky. "We have things to finish first," she said. Said her mother, which in Jamaican maternal language meant, "I see everything, I will say nothing further, but I see everything." When the review process concluded and her name was formally cleared of any professional wrongdoing, the panel's finding was unambiguous: she had been deliberately deceived by a sophisticated criminal enterprise and bore no culpability. Kezia returned to Seoul on a spring morning when the cherry blossoms were doing what they always did, indifferent and beautiful, completely unbothered by human suffering or resilience. She passed the Korean bar again. Not because she had to. Because she wanted to walk back into the profession through the front door on her own terms. She opened a practice criminal defense for clients specifically in cases involving institutional corruption, wrongful prosecution, and the particular category of people who had been used by systems larger than themselves without their knowledge or consent. She knew that category intimately. Oh Tae-young found her in the practice one evening 3 months after she opened it. He knocked. He had always knocked since Kingston, a small thing she had noticed and not mentioned. He sat across from her desk the way he sat everywhere, with the complete stillness of a man who had learned that stillness was its own form of power. "How is Juno?" he asked. "Extraordinary," Kezia said. "She has opinions about everything already. She gets that from me. Obviously." They looked at each other across the desk. Outside the window, Seoul was doing what Seoul always did, glittering and moving and containing multitudes, entirely capable of holding the worst of human nature and the best of it simultaneously without resolving the contradiction. "I want to add something to the tattoo, beside Jungsu's name." "I told you that." "I remember," Kezia said. "I want to add something that means it was not for nothing. That he is part of why something good exists now." Kezia looked at him. At the man who had stopped in the rain. At the man who had handed her an umbrella and opened a door and told her the truth about the world she had been living inside. At the man who had sat outside a medical room for 11 hours without moving. At the man who had drunk sorrel on her mother's veranda and passed the assessment. "What would you add?" she asked. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a small piece of paper on her desk. On it, a design. Delicate, precise, Korean and Jamaican symbolic elements woven together in a way that should not have worked but did, the way the two of them should not have worked and did. Beneath it, in his handwriting, 2 words. Kezia. Juno. She looked at it. Then she looked up at him. "You should have asked me first." "I'm asking now," he replied. Kezia picked up the piece of paper. Outside, Seoul glittered. The Han River moved through the city the way it always had, indifferent to what happened on its banks, carrying everything forward regardless. A woman who had been thrown into the rain. A child born in a compound on the northern edge of a city that had tried to erase them both. And a man who had stopped. "Yes," Kezia said. "Just that. Just yes." She was thrown into the rain. And in the end, the rain doesn't break the ones who were built for storms. It just shows them what they're made of. Subscribe to Novatales TV right now and turn on every notification. Thumbs up sign like this video if Kezia and Juno deserved every single thing that came after that rain. Speech balloon comment below, where in the world are you watching from? And tell us, did Oh Tae-young earn that yes? This has been an original Novatales TV story. All characters and events are entirely fictional. Copyright symbol Novatales TV. All rights reserved.